So, ladies and gents, we're going to talk to you guys about today the evolution. We're going to talk about lesson 56, the evolution of a. We're going to talk about the evolution of the horse. So this is just going to be a little lesson at the end of the day, just to talk about.
Wait, do I have to write this?
Yes.
Cool. Perfect.
So lesson 56, the evolution of the horse. Today's it's only going to be, I've only got 2 or 3 slides for today. So it's not too much, but it's just something that they wanted us to talk about. And I think it's actually kind of useful to talk about, because what we're going to do is we're going to bring in all our theories that we've learned so far. We're going to bring in this idea from last lesson that we learned about fossils. We're going to bring in our ideas that we know about natural selection, and as well, I'm going to try my best to refer to the 3 main ideas of natural selection, which were variance, competition, and selection. I'm going to use these words a couple of times this lesson to try and really get my point across, that these are the things that control evolution. What we're going to do is we're going to learn how these fossils can tell us stories about evolution, and in fact how fossils actually turned out to be one of the biggest advocates for evolution. So that's what our goal is today. Let's quickly, before I move on to today's lesson, let's look back at what we did last lesson. Last lesson we talked about fossils. We talked about how fossils are living things that have died, or they can be evidence that something has lived. So like footprints, burrows. You can even have fossilized poop. That's a thing. And that's actually kind of useful, because if you find fossilized dinosaur poop, you can be like, well, now we have an idea of what food that dinosaur ate before it pooped out and died. So yeah, the study of fossils is paleontology, and we sort of then talked about fossils in general. How is a fossil formed? Fossils are generally formed when they get encased in rock. Normally skeletons in the flesh of an animal get eaten by organisms, and then the bones get broken down by other organisms, and eventually there's nothing left. Or they get broken down by rocks or wind or something. But if you are able to get that organism wrapped up really quickly, either under ice or snow or lava, then you're able to actually preserve that animal. And that animal can be encased in rock, and that rock solidifies, and that's how we get a skeleton, a fossil. Now, there are other fossils as well. Fossilization can be weird. I actually looked as well. It turns out that this slide is sort of talked about as well in the textbook. There is a part of it, of the textbook, that talks about how mosquitoes and flies and bugs can get trapped in particular amber, which is kind of good, because otherwise they may be too small to be able to fossilize. And then, of course, how sometimes our fossils can make casts. What a cast is when you get a hole in a rock caused by a fossil, and then that hole can get filled up by minerals or something like that. It's actually in the textbook, which I thought was interesting. Following along from this, we ended up with dating fossils. How do you date a fossil? It's not on Tinder. It is by comparing one fossil to another fossil to see which one is older. And then, of course, you could also use absolute dating, which is finding exactly the age of something. How old is it exactly? Relative dating can be done by using sedimentary rocks. So you look at what layer is it on. If it's deep in a sedimentary rock, then you know that it's old. If it's up the top of a sedimentary rock, then you know it's young. And then absolute dating, that involves looking at isotopes in the particular fossil, and sort of saying, well, according to this isotope and knowing its half-life, we can determine closer than. So, for example, Relative dating might just say, oh, this is roughly around this old, whereas absolute dating can narrow us in a bit closer. It's not going to be super duper exact, but it's going to get us a lot closer. And then we finished the lesson off by talking about the Archaeopteryx. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce that, but that's my guess. And that was an interesting fossil, one of probably the most relevant fossils in the most recent times, because it was half dinosaur, half bird, and that gave us a bit of a theory that perhaps modern birds came from dinosaurs. But we're actually going to look at a different story with fossils today. We're going to look at the story of the horse. Now, the horse, and we're going to look at how horses are linked to evolution. I'm going to give you guys to copy some stuff down on this slide. So get ready. The first thing I want to talk about is the evolution of the horse is one of the best studied evolutions in paleontology. If you look at paleontology, we've got lots of different evolutions. We can look at the evolution of different things. So someone's asked me, can I go back? Go back to this is the first, you mean back to this slide here? Evolution of the horse? I don't know. This is the first slide here. Sorry, I can't. Yeah, I'm going to keep it on this slide for about 10 seconds longer, just because someone asked me to quickly, they wanted to copy it down. Yeah, what we're going to look at is going to be looking at a bit of a story. My goal for this lesson is not necessarily my goal for this story is to use this almost as a bit of a summary, to summarize what we've been talking about the past few lessons. I believe from here, we're going to start talking about going back to the topic that we've already talked about. We're going to talk a little bit about genetics, I think. And we're going to talk a little bit about how evolution and genetics are tied together. Because they're obviously very, very tied together, especially now that we know that the only way that we can get evolution is when we have a variance, a shift in the genes or something. I'm going to move on now to looking at this first slide here. If you haven't copied this down yet, you can just grab a look at the YouTube video that will go up probably sometime this weekend. So firstly, the evolution of the horse is one of the best studied evolutions in paleontology. We've been looking at horse skeletons for a very long time. And whilst we have other skeletons, we can look at dogs and stuff. I think because there are so many horses, and it's just such a big, there's so many horses around the world, it's been a very easy sort of topic, a very easy sort of animal to look at. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. The next thing I wanted to look at is this idea here. So Bill, sorry, Talik said something. I have no idea what he just said. We're going to look at this one, which is called the Eo. By the way, I'm not necessarily 100% sure how to pronounce half of these things. I'm just going to be guessing. We're going to look at the Eohippus. So this is like the first horse, like the ancient horse. Now, it doesn't actually look much like a horse. At the moment, it looks like a small, like almost like a dog, like a large dog sort of thing with a weird nose. But yeah. And Eohippus to modern horse. So as you go from A to B, right, from the start to the end, this is a time frame of 60 million years. Look, we go from 60 million years ago to 1 million years ago, or 59 million years if you want to be precise. This shows us that because we can actually find animals that appear in this chain, it shows us that evolution is very slow. This is something that's actually really important to understand for evolution, because especially at the start, when people were started to think, it's like, oh no, what happens if an ape has a child and the child is a human? It's like, no, that's not going to happen. Evolution occurs over a very, very long time. So, so this is a very long time. Now, what can we see that has happened from the start to the end? What are some things that we can sort of point out that's a little bit interesting? Well, we can sort of see that one thing's for sure, the height of this has gone up by a lot. It is, by the end, it is a lot taller than what it was at the start. So height is definitely one thing that has changed over time. You might want to say the color of the animal, but if you want, to be honest with you, the color of the fur can be different as you go. Plus, as well, we only have skeletons of ancient horses. There's no way we can know what color their fur was. So we know they're bigger, their bones are stronger. That is true. One thing we can look at as well is their feet. You can see here that you've got you can see here that we've got a foot that's got 3 toes, whereas here we've only got 1 foot. And here again, you've still got 3 toes, 3 toes, 3 toes, but then you sort of merge into 1 hoof. And that's sort of like, it's going to make, it must have given it an advantage. Otherwise, why would it evolve that way? So let's look at this. Horses have grown taller. That's one of the big things that they've done. They've also gained teeth equipped for fruit and grass. So they've got teeth that have allowed them to be very good at eating grass and fruit and leaves. And they started to have a single hoof rather than toes. Rather than having 3 or 4 toes that could break off and then, be bad, they've sort of evolved to have 1 hoof. And so that must have given it an advantage in some way. Remember that unless a particular trait gives you an advantage, why would that trait get passed down? Okay, so being taller might mean that you can access more higher fruit, you can move faster, it's harder to get attacked by animals, so that would be an advantage to it. You can also sort of see as well the tail has become bigger. The tail is really good for, it doesn't actually say in this slide, I believe the tail is used to get rid of like flies, and flies carry disease, so it makes sense to have a big tail that allows you to get rid of flies, which means you're less likely to get disease, means you're more likely to survive and pass on those long tail genes. But that's just a little bit of a guess of mine. The last thing I want you guys to talk about here is just why some of these changes happen. Why did some of these changes happen? Some of these changes are because of environmental selection. Now, I put this word in bold. Why don't they just use fly spray? Maybe Talik's fly spray didn't exist 10 million years ago, but I don't know. Maybe. You could have asked, why didn't they evolve long tongues so they could eat the flies? But that'd be creepy. Could you imagine? Talik, could you imagine a meter long tongue on a horse? That'd be scary AF. Yeah, their hair grew too. That is true. They did actually, Brendan Lee has actually pointed that out, that pretty much at the start they have barely much of a mane. As time has gone on, they've got a bit more of a mane. You can also sort of tell that their ears have gotten larger. Their ears getting larger has probably benefited them because then they can be more able to hear predators before they approach. But yeah, I'm not actually sure why all of these changes happen, but yeah. So some of these changes are because of environmental selection. Now I've bolded this because I told you guys we're going to try and use these words. Remember, environmental selection is when the environment says, this is the challenge I'm setting you guys. Who can survive? And so the challenge that they set is the forest died. So there are lots of plains. So lots of plains. When I say plains, I'm not talking about airplanes. I'm talking about like wide open spaces. And so having long legs to run would make you better at competing to avoid predators. Remember, there's a competition. If you have 3 horses, right, you got 1 horse, you got 2 horses, and then you've got 3 horses. This is going to be a massive exaggeration. Still, whatever, doesn't matter. If the one with the larger legs, if he can outrun the other 2, then guess what? It's going to be the other 2 that are going to get eaten by, whatever predator happens to be around. So that's why it's an advantage to be able to outrun the competition. Is you're not trying to outrun the lion. You just, that same saying is like, you don't have to be the fastest person in the group. You just have, like, if there's a horde of zombies after you, you don't have to be the fastest in your group. You just have to be faster than the slowest person in the group. Or you have to trip over someone. That's how you escape zombies. Yeah, anyway, so that's all about, so that's all about the speed, and that's the competition. You want to be when you're competing, you're not competing, you're competing against other people in your species. And of course, if that long-legged horse is more likely to survive, then that long-legged horse is more likely to, pass on its genes to other horses. So you'll end up with more long-legged horses, whereas the horses that don't make it they're not gonna pass on their short leg genes. Right, I'm gonna take off this slide in about 45 seconds from now. So if you need to copy anything down on this slide, let me know, but we can change the slide in about 45 seconds or so. There's a lot of text on the slide, I know. I tried my best to cut it down as much as I could, but it's true. I'm trying to tell a bit of a story. The next slide's got a little bit less text, but there's still a fair bit. But I want to also really talk about this idea of selection. Selection in this case, environmental selection, was no more forests. We're going to have lots of plains. And if you think about it, having toes in a forest is really good. If you're trying to navigate rocks and sticks and trees, if you can climb with your toes, then that's going to be useful. But if you're just running around in the plains of Africa or wherever, you don't need toes. So, you need something that will grip the ground. So that's why the hoof probably evolved. Okay, we're going to jump in now to the next slide. So the next slide here is, I just wanted to
give your dog a bone, Mr. Greer.
What?
Give your dog a bone.
What, you need an extra second here?
Nah, I'm just saying. Your dog's gone crazy.
Oh, yeah. She's like, I don't know what she's barking at. Probably some kind of bird or something. Anyway. Hey, Juno! Oi, shush. I'm not going to bark at her. It's fine. Chill out. Okay, all right, good. Come here. All right, so the next part I wanted to talk to you guys about is nothing is straightforward. This is just a quick little.
Yep. I'd like to adjust that. What do you mean nothing is straightforward?
Someone's trying to break in here, probably. That's Shush. When I say nothing is straightforward, I'm trying to say is that this picture I found was really interesting. One of the problems that I have with this idea of evolution, and I'm going to go back to this slide for a second, is I don't want you guys to think, oh, look, it was just perfect. This eventually one day evolved into this. It was just like destined to be. It was like this, then this, then this. But what I found interesting, and I found this picture really interesting here, is that you see the same pictures, but you can see the tree, right? You went from this to this, and you went there via this route here. Nice, easy, done. But you've also got a couple of these extra branches. Might be like, okay, so what? What's the deal with these extra branches? These extra branches represent new species of horse, like different species of horse. that evolved, you know, lived for a couple of hundred million years, a couple of million years. Yeah, in this case, this horse, this species lived for about, you know, 15 million years and then died out. This one down here lived for about, yeah, you know, 10, 15 million years and then died out. Nothing is straightforward. It wasn't a quick and easy from one to A to B. You had to have some horses die out and some species die out. And I thought this was really an interesting look at that. It's not just from A to B. So what I thought is, yeah, another place. So yeah, that's just one of the things. And I'm going to talk about that on the slide. Another place horses competed over was food. And horses evolved to have teeth better suited to eat grass. So if you actually look at a horse's teeth, they're usually really good. They've got massive molars, and that's really good for eating grass. Not so good for eating fruit. But if you've left the forest and you've already evolved long legs to walk around the plains, you're not going to be eating much fruit anytime soon. So it doesn't make sense to have teeth designed to eat food. In 100 years, horses will have wings. Yeah, I mean, like you could talk about Pegasus, you could talk about flying horses, but then of course you need to then talk about if you were a horse and you've got wings, then why do you need to have long legs? And then it's like, you know, you could just get those long legs would slowly devolve over time. I'm going to quickly, I've only got 3 bits on the slide, so I'm going to put up the second bit here. And this is dealing with those branches that I was talking about. I want you guys to copy this down. As horses evolved, genetic variations caused new evolutionary branches. So that's what this is like this here, these here are evolutionary branches. And that's going to cause by variations, right? They're going to be like, there's going to have some, like, at some point down here, there was a genetic mutation. And that genetic mutation made, and same here, at some point here, there was a genetic mutation. And that led to new species. And these new species of horse, would, you know, stick around for a long time. And it's good because you could think about this as like, at some point there was an event that caused this species to get wiped out, but this species didn't get wiped out. If we were all this one species, all the horses were this one species, then we wouldn't have any horses around. This is why it's good to have this branching off, is to make sure that, you know, you can survive extinction events. These animals went extinct, but some evolved to be much different from horses first. So some of these horses at the end of this chain will probably look really different from the horses we see today. Even though they were still from the same original branch. They diverged so much that they would have looked very different. The last sort of thing I wanted to point out was this: the genus Equus. Now that's what the modern horses we're referring to are. Have lots of species. Now varieties. There are different. Even now there are different species of horse, right? And those species could continue over millions of years to evolve and into even more and more and more species. The different species of horse include horses, which we know, donkeys and zebras. All of these are different versions of horses. I'm not sure of giraffes. I don't think so. I think giraffes may be convergent evolution in that, yeah, they also have long legs, but they didn't evolve from horses. They just happen to. Long legs are really good for when you want to sprint around in the plains. So that's probably why they both have long. It's because of convergent evolution, not divergent evolution. But horses, zebras, and donkeys, all divergent evolution. They're all still in the same genus. So yeah, nothing is straightforward, okay? It's not as simple as, hey, this old horse evolved one day into this new horse. No, there were still different species of horse getting branched off, and then those species dying out and so on. All right, I've got one little slide left. I don't think I need you guys to copy down this last slide, but I do still want to talk about that and also what the extra homework is. So I'm only going to keep this slide up for another 30 seconds. If you do want to copy this, remember these slides are available. You can just look at this after the lesson, or you can watch the YouTube video when it goes up at some point this weekend. But yeah, I'm only going to give you guys 30 more seconds to copy this down if you are still writing it down. I know there's a lot of text today, so I get that. But even if you don't copy everything down, I just want you to focus on the themes here of competition. Like, it's really good to have teeth that are better at eating grass, because then you can compete for the who can get the fattest as horses, who can get the most nutrients. It's good to have variation. So if one species of horse goes extinct, there are other species to pick up the slack. And the reason we have these variations is because, yeah, we have different varieties, different species. They just diverge over time. And what causes them to diverge? Probably selection pressure. Obviously, horses in donkeys come out to be grey because they're walking around the mountains, whereas zebras are white and black to try and get them to help blend in with the grasses that are going to be in the forest and so on and so forth, in the savannah. So the last slide I'm going to show you guys, I'm actually going to cross this pencil out. You know what? I'm not going to get you guys to copy this slide down, because I've already gotten you guys to copy down a bunch today. But I would like you to listen to me as I talk. So what are fossils? Why are fossils so good? Fossils have provided an insight into the origins of species, even the origin of some genus. So that's why fossils are so good. We would not understand horses as much as we did without these fossils. We wouldn't be able to understand how related zebras and horses are. We wouldn't be able to find these ancient forms of horse if we didn't have them. This is an example on the left of a fossil of a horse, an ancient horse. It looks like it must have died in a riverbed, hence the fossilized fish as well. So this has died in a riverbed. Yeah, what are fossils also good for? They've also given us proof of the theory of evolution. Because we understand the fossils of horses so well, we can see where they started and where they finished, and we can explain why they changed. That's allowed us to get a really good theory of evolution. We can see that small modifications have happened over 60 million years, which has meant that horses have evolved to adapt to changes. They've evolved to adapt to no forests by growing longer legs. They've evolved to eat grass better and better. They've evolved to deal with running away from predators because there are no trees to hide behind, and they've evolved to run at all because of their hooves. So yeah, and we can see these changes over the million years in their fossils. Of course, later on, the end of the story would be that humans would later domesticate horses. In our lifetime, we've domesticated horses, we've trained them so that we can ride them and that we can turn them into our pets, use them to work in the fields. And so that then began our changes to horses. We would start to use artificial selection and breed horses that, like Clydesdales, that are strong horses that can pull carts, breed horses that were race horses that could run really fast, breed horses that could move very long distances in case you need to mail. If you need someone to mail something, you can actually get horses that can run for a long distance. So yeah, and it was artificial selection, us selecting which horses we want to breed and which horses we don't want to breed. and that would then lead to human-guided evolution. Because it's still evolution, it's still the change in the heritable traits over time. It's just not done by natural selection, but done by artificial selection, by us. So that's the end of that story.